Um, I would just like to start by saying that I'm very thankful for the honor of being able to share the findings of our study. I wish that I could have been there in Prague with you, assuming that some of you are there, but sadly my schedule didn't allow for it. So I'm presenting this from Aberdeen in Scotland, where I'm currently a visiting scholar, but my home institution is St. Jerome's University in the University of Waterloo in Canada. So, I'm going to start by giving some credit to my research team. Here they are on the screen. So you can see that the work that I'm presenting to you has been done by a lot more people than just myself. Our interdisciplinary research team seeks to understand how people living with dementia experience personal autonomy in order to inform autonomy-promoting care. In another paper, our team also showed that empirical research generally fails to define personal autonomy adequately, pointing to the need for a common framework that's theoretically and empirically informed. We actually distilled a framework of that sort from the relevant philosophical literature published last year in the Gerontologist. You can see the paper there. And accordingly, here's a little diagram of personal autonomy. What we mean by that, it's got the three dimensions that show up there: decisional autonomy, which is the ability to make one's own decisions; executional autonomy, which is the ability to carry out one's decisions; and authenticity, the ability to recognize one's decisions as one's own. The ability of human beings to exercise autonomy in each dimension always depends on a context of social and relational support, which is why you can see that surrounding. If you want more information about that, you can always check that paper out. So in the second phase of this project, the first phase was to distill this conceptual framework of personal autonomy. In the second phase, we sought to study the phenomenon of personal autonomy more concretely in the light of personal experience. So we conducted conversational interviews with 8 individuals living with dementia. The findings of this study add depth and nuance to the understanding of personal autonomy from the earlier phase of the project. And so this talk is going to share what we learned and its implications for supporting people living with dementia to exercise personal autonomy as part of a flourishing life and in the context of this condition. I do want to say a quick note about the method that we used. In our investigation of personal autonomy as experienced by individuals living with dementia, we were guided by the conviction that the best way toward a universal understanding of this phenomenon was through in-depth engagement with the particular. We felt that it would not be possible to grasp what autonomy means for people living with dementia in general unless we could see it within a relatively comprehensive vision of each person's life story and self-narrative. We identified interpretive phenomenological analysis as the method best suited to this goal. By contrast to quantitative methods and more positivistic qualitative methods, IPA is designed to make room for such in-depth engagement. The researcher develops a set of personal experiential statements, PETs, which are effectively themes or patterns within the individual transcript, and only after having done this for all the participants begins to look for broader patterns across participants. And those broader patterns are called group experiential themes. And that's what I'll be focusing on presenting primarily. So our participants, following best practices for IPA, we interviewed 8 individuals, each of whom identified as having a form of dementia. Most of them participated in the interviews on their own, but one was accompanied by a support person, his daughter, and another participated together with a spouse. And the pair of them functioned as a kind of dyadic subject, but we primarily focused on the wife in that pair. The study lead, Jane Kipfer, held 2 open-ended, free-flowing conversational interviews with each participant. In the remainder of the time that I have for this presentation, I would like to focus on our findings and share some preliminary reflections about their significance for understanding personal autonomy in the context of life with dementia. If there's interest, we can always talk about method some more in the question and answer period, or you can send me an email if you want to ask any further questions. So our analysis, here's our results in a summary form. Our analysis identified 5 group experiential themes, each of which expresses a key pattern in participants' descriptions of their experience of personal autonomy. Each of these gets breaks down into 2 or 3 sub-themes that help to unpack different angles that emerged in the experiential statements of our 8 participants. So I'm going to be presenting a quick and sort of truncated version of this so that I can stick within the time that I've been given. And so I'll just jump in. Basically, what I'm going to be sharing is a short summary, and each sub-theme will be illustrated usually by just one participant's experience. If you were to read the whole paper, you would see multiple participants represented in each example. So the first get was, I'm still here. This theme, let me get over to it. This theme addresses participants locating their autonomy in an enduring sense of being a person who thinks, hopes, and has purposes and goals. Participant 6 drew a distinction between his cognitive changes and a deeper core that endured. And so we felt like his perspective was particularly representative. He acknowledged the change associated with dementia as real, but not fundamental. He, just quoting him, how I relate to people, it's changing, but not as much as a lot of other things. At the center, at my center, when I get to my core, he said, the deep spiritual side, that has not changed. And I think around some things I'm probably clueless, but on things that I'm not clueless on, my compassion is still there. The second sub-theme under this first get, you just get close to a community. Several participants expressed a sense that past community connections continue to fundamentally shape their identity in the present. So participant 8 and her spouse shared the way they continue to exist in a network of relations that gave meaning to their lives. She said, you just get close to a community. Over the years, we've stayed connected. And although they no longer actively engaged with people in the same ways, participating in activities and locations that reminded them of their past supported their sense of ongoing connection, so that she could say, it just feels like home because of the memories we've had here in the past. For many other participants, telling stories of their past was itself a way that they reaffirmed and sustained their identity. The third sub-theme, I learned to be somewhat accommodating to life change. Participants understood their character, core values, and skills that they continue to exercise as having been shaped by their life experience. They drew on that history as a resource for the present. So participant 3 anchored his identity in his parents and his profession, and saw his own capacity for sound judgment as inherited from his parents. His father was a prominent physician and his mother was a nurse, and also from his own experience in his profession. He said, you learn your ability to make a decision in the right direction. And his acuity in assessing the strengths of his current caregivers, for example, reflected his professional assessments of younger doctors that he had performed in the past. And he frequently appealed to stories from his practice to describe current situations and relationships. So that was our first get, and I'll move on to the second one. So I'm going kind of quickly, but I want to get through all of it. The second group experiential theme is, I don't think I've let it bother me that much. I totally do notice it. This theme captures how participants perceived, made sense of, and lived alongside the symptoms of dementia. It illuminates the lived negotiation between capacity and constraint that sits at the heart of the experience of cognitive change. Participants were realistic about the losses accompanying their condition, but they were able to make life livable regardless. So sub-theme 1, I have to wait for my brain to catch up. Participants varied in how acutely they noticed their symptoms and to what extent they attributed changes in capacity to dementia. Most, however, spoke of clear and sometimes distressing changes. For participant 3, the loss of memory and of the capacity to express himself was acute and hard to bear. He said, "I lost my memory. I lost my good memory." And that's been very, very hard to hold on to. He described his thinking as repeatedly interrupted. He said, "My brain just stops me from talking." And he used vivid images like, "I have a blank brain and my brain has run out of gas." Subtheme 2, I'm not going to sit in my room and cry unless I absolutely have to. Participants exhibited a wide emotional range in relation to their diagnosis. For participant 2, acceptance of her condition was complicated by a felt mismatch between the diagnosis and her own experience. She knew that tests had indicated dementia, but she didn't feel sick or meaningfully different. In her words, "I'm not whirling around and crying and falling all over." This gap left her uncertain about whether the condition was real, and she pressed for evidence that she could recognize. She said, "So I'd like to know, who said there was dementia? And where is it? Show it to me." Subtheme 3 is entitled, I make a joke about it more often than I would be concerned. Participants described emotional and practical strategies through which they manage their changing reality. Participant 1, for example, offered a strategy of release that she described as follows: "You cry really hard and just relax and put your head down and think about it. And when you wake up, don't worry about it." But several other participants used humor as a coping strategy that was key to dealing with their condition. In a kind of representative statement, participant 5 indicated that dementia happens to a lot of people anyway, so I make a joke about it more often than I would be concerned. So that was how participants interacted with their condition and experience of dementia. Group experiential theme number 3, life is good and simple. This third theme describes a felt simplification and lightening of life, fewer pressures, less to decide, and a contentment that several participants experienced as freedom, alongside a longing for small pleasures. It reframes autonomy in a striking way. With fewer demands, decisional autonomy is exercised across fewer life domains, and for some, this was felt not as a loss, but as a kind of liberation. So subtheme 1, a lot of times it's relinquishing things. Participants spoke of letting go as wise adaptation to changing circumstances. Participant 6 articulated this most fully, describing relinquishment as relief from cognitive burden. He said a lot of times it's relinquishing things to other people, which he described as giving him a great deal of relief. He said, "I'm really relieved to have the complexity of it taken away because I just get overwhelmed at the complex thinking that's involved in managing all kinds of things in his life." He framed his ability to accept his limits as a clear-eyed engagement with reality. Subtheme 2, I don't have the pressures on me that I've had all my life. A sense of freedom from the responsibilities and pressures of earlier life was a core element of this theme, with a supportive environment making this freedom possible. Participant 7 repeatedly used the phrase "spoiled rotten" to describe the way that he was so well taken care of by others that he was utterly free to enjoy life. He said to himself, "Kick back and relax. Somebody's going to look after you anyway. Then that's their job to fuss." By contrast to the many detailed plans she had to make in running a business in the past with her husband, participant 1 said that these days she had no need to plan. Instead, she just seized the day, which she described colorfully as "run like hell." Subtheme number 3, I'm just one stage away from heaven. Participants described a settled contentment with routine and a modest, sufficient life. All participants lived in a retirement residence with a structured routine and responsive staff, and many expressed gratitude for the quality of their home. Gratitude was the keynote of participant four's days. She said, I'm grateful for things, I'm grateful that I'm healthy, and I'm grateful where I live. She summed up her sense of contentment with a metaphor. Life is good and simple for little old participant's name. She's a happy little kitty cat, she said. Participant 7 cast his contentment in his familiar register of good fortune. He said, I'm cruising along in a wonderful, smiley environment. Prone to somewhat hyperbolic language, he repeatedly stated, I think I'm just one stage away from heaven. This was how he described his experience. So that was number 3, or get C, on to the fourth, get D. This one's entitled, again, these are all in the words of our participants, I can still do things well because I've got so many wonderful people helping me. This theme captures how participants continue to exercise autonomy, both decisional, deliberating and forming intentions, and executional, translating decisions into action. They increasingly did so through relationships. Participants described a range of supportive relational arrangements, from simple consultation to complete deferral to others. Although authenticity is potentially at risk in deferral, participants generally understood these ways of involving others in making and executing decisions as authentic expressions of personal autonomy. Subtheme number 1, I'm my own boss, I say. Participants had a clear sense of continuing to make their own decisions, even while acknowledging that they were substantially supported in many ways. Participant 4 asserted that she was self-sufficient and self-reliant in relation to mundane daily decisions like going for a walk, doing her laundry, and getting dressed. Participant 5 expressed a general authorship over her choices. She said, I don't think anybody makes my decisions. I'm the one that's making the decisions. And she added, I'm my own boss, I say. Subtheme 2. Number 1, you need the truth. Alongside these statements of independence that we just talked about, participants described a profound involvement of others in their making and carrying out decisions. When involving others, participants exercised autonomy through careful discernment. Key factors included trust, reliability, and being known and listened to. Participant 3 placed truth and trustworthiness at the foundation. He said, number 1, you need the truth, bar none. He admired his caregiver's character and abilities, and he added, they're very good people. I'm lucky to have them. Subtheme number 3. My decision was to go along with their decision. With changing capacities, agency is exercised within limits. The decision to move into assisted living was particularly significant. Participants often chose to go along with the decisions that others were making for the sake of relationship. So in describing her move into a long-term care home, participant 5 put it most clearly, I really wanted to stay in my own house, but they were afraid that I'd fall or trip. And so my decision was to go along with their decision. I didn't want to make it any harder for them. In a similar way, participant 8 described her own move into the residence. And in the interview, her husband stated, we did not make any decisions about coming in here. Our kids did. But participant 8 qualified this. She preferred the language of influence, explaining that while her sons had initiated the process of the move, they had agreed to move in based on their own reasons. And so in that way, agency was exercised by deferring to the decisions of other people, and yet it remained as a form of agency. The last of our group experiential themes, I'm glad there are other people here, but I'm not glad for all of them. This theme captures the double-edged character of help. Participants described the indispensability of support in exercising executional autonomy, the capacity to translate decisions into action. But the very same help, they found, could also undermine autonomy. So the first of these two, and there's only 2 sub-themes this time. The first of them, I think everybody should ask for help. In an assisted living setting, residents are surrounded by staff whose role is to help residents. The tension between appreciating this intensive help while sometimes resenting the way that it impedes freedom was expressed most clearly by participant 2. So first I want to talk about the positive side. She described the transformative power of responsive support. She said, "This morning, I had a rough morning, and people were jumping to come and help me. That felt wonderful, like I'm still a woman that can be at least okay and be cared for." Individuals appreciated when others paid attention, answered questions, provided guidance and wayfinding, slowed their pace, and acted calmly, quietly, and with understanding. But there was another side to this, and so sub-theme number 2, somebody is always saying, "You can't do that." Where help turned into being managed, scolded, or constrained, participants, again, most vividly participant 2, but also participant 5, experienced as a threat to their autonomy. For participant 2, the very experience of being surrounded by staff who were trying to help could become an experience of oppression, as when she would be questioned when leaving her room. She said, "If I make a decision, somebody is always saying, 'You can't do that. You just can't do that. Go back and sit in your room.'" When outdoors, her desire to stand and look at the water felt policed. She said, "I get yelled at. 'Get away from the water. You might jump. You might fall in.'" She described feeling stripped of choice. She said, "It's like I don't have a decision. I may as well just lay down and cry," and I did. This experience even provoked in her an impulse to flee. She said, "Sometimes I honestly want to run." So that was, and I see that I didn't advance the slide here, but there's get number E, which I've been talking about in a summary form. And that sums up my sharing of our findings. So what I will do in the little bit of time that I have left is briefly discuss what we see so far as the significance of our findings, and we're still working on this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. The words of our participants and the lived experience that they express contradict several common attitudes toward life with dementia that are afloat within our culture. Contrary to the idea that individuals living with dementia are no longer themselves, that they have undergone biographical death, if not physical death, or sometimes people say only a shell of the person remains. In contrast to all of that, our participants experienced a strong continuity of self in spite of living with symptoms of dementia. Their rootedness via memory in past experiences, communities, and relationships provided them with powerful resources to sustain their present identity, a finding that's somewhat ironic given the association of dementia with memory loss. Several participants challenged the usefulness of the label of dementia, resisting the cultural trope of the dementia sufferer as completely incompetent. In light of her sense of well-being, one participant even suggested that we should go to the media and inform them that dementia is not a real condition. The individuals in our study continued to experience themselves as autonomous individuals capable of making decisions and carrying them out. Due to their cognitive and practical limitations, they required help from others in various ways, from reminders about appointments to assistance with transportation to emotional support and a listening ear. But depending on others to exercise autonomy is not something unique to people living with dementia. None of us makes and carries out authentic decisions in a vacuum or a void. We all exist in an extremely complex web of social interconnections, without which none of the 3 dimensions of personal autonomy would be remotely possible for any of us. The responses of our participants constructed a richly textured account of the various ways that we can realize autonomy through collaboration with others, even when our own abilities have lessened. Contrary to the stereotype of dementia as a fate worse than death, all participants attested to experiencing a high quality of life, with some seemingly valuing their current situation much more favorably than previous points in their lives. The members of our research team had our own preconceptions challenged by the hyperbolic language that some participants used to describe how wonderful their lives were, under the care of supportive family and resident staff. Rather than resenting what they had lost, they found a profound contentment in what was available to them and simple joys of many kinds. Somewhat paradoxically, they experienced a reduced scope of decision-making and increased deferral to others as a form of freedom that contributed to enjoyment of life. In this, participants were not naive. They understood the importance of ensuring that those involved in their decision-making process were competent and were acting according to their best interests. And some shared ways in which the intended help of others at times strongly countered their agency, provoking them to withdraw or want to run away. But these feelings were accompanied by understanding and sincere appreciation for the benefits of this help. The double edge of help points to the importance of a responsive and collaborative relationship with appointed decision makers who check in frequently with the individual to make sure that decisions continue to be carried out in a manner consistent with their values and goals. Our participants have each been adapting to the changes that they're experiencing with more acceptance than upset. It helps when others in their lives also gradually adapt and through paying attention can understand and support effectively with empathy for their experience. Being humbled is something that we can, with some work, accept. Being humiliated is not. Participants spoke warmly of help that affirmed them as capable people still worth caring for. So just a final slide here, limitations of our study. And we've probably got a lot more to think about, but the main thing that we can see from our study, as you can tell, much of our findings were that people living with dementia, and some of them were in very late stages of dementia, yet had a very high quality of life. And this is often a result of the fact that our participants were all supported by networks of caring people who have to ensure that they have an environment to live in that's respectful and caring. Their lives were generally comfortable and well managed, enabling them to be free of worry. This is obviously not the case for everyone living with dementia. Our sample was also small. It was fairly homogeneous in terms of ethnicity and sort of lifestyle economic status. So the findings of our study can't be generalized to all people living with dementia. However, it does show that for many people with the right kind of support, dementia does not need to be experienced as something that drastically undermines or destroys the ability to exercise autonomy. Quite the contrary. And so this suggests, along with the findings of others like Tom Kitwood in the past or Stephen Sabat, that a lot of what's going on in dementia is determined by the quality of the care that's provided and the relational support, rather than being a sort of necessary outcome of the condition itself. And so with that, I'm going to conclude. Thank you for listening to my talk. And if you do end up watching this through the video, I hope you can find me through my email address. I'm at St. Jerome's University and the University of Waterloo, and I would be very happy to get questions from any of you. So that is it for me. I'm going to end recording now.